It's so great to see everybody again and to have this fascinating conversation with Geisha. She needs no intro, but I'll give you a short bio. She has more than 3 decades of experience in the energy industry, and she joined PG&E as CEO and president in 2007. Geisha is steering PG&E's mission to provide safe, reliable, affordable, and clean energy to 16 million people in Northern and Central California. And she has overseen the utility's electric business, including transmission, distribution, power generation, nuclear operations, energy procurement, and customer care. So Geisha, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here, Katie.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, we've talked about this at this conference in different ways already, and I wonder if we could just start by talking about the goal, 50% renewables. We've already been told it's going to be no problem. You're on the ground.
No, I agree with that.
Okay.
I do. I think, you know, we have made so much progress in the state of California in terms of advancing clean energy, in terms of advancing renewables. And so as I sit here today, we have passed 33%. We are well on our way to 50%. And if anything, we might be able to achieve it prior to the deadline, which is 2030. And we've even, my company, PG&E, we've actually made a voluntary commitment to get to 55% by 2031. So we're feeling very bullish about our ability to not just meet that goal, but beat it, and do it in a way that still delivers safe and reliable and affordable power to our company and to our customers. And that's really the key. How do we make sure that as we continue down this path of providing renewable, cleaner energy to our customers, that we can continue to make sure that the power supply is safe, that it's reliable, and that it doesn't leave anyone behind, that it continues to be affordable. So we're feeling pretty good about that. And I would tell you that for us, it's less about the renewable target and more about our common sort of foe here, which is carbon. Mm-hmm. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our economy across the board? So today, I said, you know, at the end of 16, we were at 33% of renewable portfolio standard qualified renewables, but we're 70% greenhouse gas free.
Wow.
And so we're really excited about that, and it's about how do we continue to drive even higher and better levels of clean energy for our customers.
So one of the ways in which you want to do this is to rethink how we see the electric grid and the power grid. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and maybe even go into one of the pilots that you're running in San Jose, because I think it's a really powerful example of sort of the theoretical things we've already discussed today.
Yeah, the grid is this amazing engineering marvel, and I know that sounds geeky, but it is. It's this platform that's always there, always on, that provides tremendous connectivity and universal access to all of our customers, which is one of the key things that we think is so critical. The clean energy economy can't leave anyone behind. It can't just be for the affluent. It can't just be for folks that can afford the solar rooftop units on their homes or the Tesla. It's got to be folks in the Central Valley that are living in many cases paycheck to paycheck. They deserve a clean energy economy every bit as much as anyone else does. And that's where the grid comes in. It becomes this, I think of it more as a climate solutions platform, interconnecting all these various technologies, whether it's private solar, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's storage that customers own, storage that utilities own. It provides this tremendous connective platform to get it all delivered safely and efficiently to our customers. And so that's why we're so bullish on that as well. And making sure that this platform, that we continue to make investments in it that will enable higher and more levels of distributed energy resources to be connected. And you can only do that by making investments, because the grid, as it was initially thought of back in the day, and I think Edison could probably recognize some parts of our grid today, it was designed as a delivery system, you know, moving power from point A to point B. But where we're moving towards is really a more integrated sort of platform, enabling multi-directional power flows. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to invest in sensing technology and greater levels of regulation and really smart technology to enable all that to happen seamlessly.
So talk a little bit about your pilot in San Jose. You've partnered with General Electric to put in place a distributed energy resource management system. Yeah. And so how does that exemplify what you just talked about?
So excited about that. So in how appropriate, in Silicon Valley, in San Jose, we've got 3 pilots going on concurrently over this overall project. 3 interconnected feeders. Feeders are large circuits that deliver electricity to customers. And what we've done is we've said, all right, you know, we don't think that there's any question that the technology is there that's going to continue to enable us to have higher levels of distributed energy resources, or continue to have improvements in terms of GHG resources or GHG-free resources. There's no question that technology is there. The issue is, how do you integrate all this technology, some of which we own, so we have access and visibility and control to, but some of the technology, some of the equipment that's really being connected to our grid is owned by our customers. Mm-hmm. And we don't have visibility to that, and we certainly don't have control over that. That's the frontier. How do we have an integrated solution, an integrated platform that, regardless of who owns the equipment, is optimized? And so excited about this. That's where the distributed energy resource management system comes in. We're working with General Electric, with Tesla, and with Green Charge to really look at customer-owned solar, customer-owned residential batteries, commercially owned, customer-owned battery storage, utility-owned storage, our own grid with all its bells and whistles on any given day. And the distributed energy resource management system looks at how do you solve for grid constraints on a daily basis. How do you dispatch economically the right resource at the right time so that it works as one integrated system and not a bunch of isolated technologies that are not, well integrated? So this pilot is just terrific. We started it this summer, so it's too early to talk about how it's going, but we believe that in the next 6 to 7 months we'll have some initial results that then we can, use to say, all right, what's the next phase? We believe that what we have here with all of these distributed energy resources, along with working with the utility resources, is really the shape of things to come. And importantly, it's about finding a system that allows us to knit it all together so that we can extract the highest value for our customers as well as solve grid issues.
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
Absolutely. And after this question, I'm going to open up to the floor for questions. Just wave your hands and we'll get you a microphone, and feel free to ask away. We just talked about an investment that feels like it can get us into the next phase. Mm-hmm. It's really exciting. And I want to tie this to something that happened this morning. A decision was made by the CPUC that denied San Diego Gas and Electric cost recovery from wildfires.
Right.
Now, the CPUC has traditionally paid for those cost overruns after something like a huge wildfire. But San Diego in this case was faulted for not trimming trees and other maintenance issues. Now, it's a first-time denial. We don't know how it's going to play out. But I'm wondering, this potential expense that could hit all utility companies in California, what implications exist for investment and for the ability of a large utility to then make the sorts of investments that we need to make for our future?
It's a really important and critical question. I would say, first of all, I haven't had a chance. It just came out this morning to look at all the details of the actual decision that was made by the commission. But it's a big deal only from the perspective of when we think about climate change. This isn't a future issue for us. I firmly believe that we are seeing the effects of climate change right now. So whether it's these incredible hurricanes that we had in the Caribbean this year, or in Florida, the flooding that came from it in Texas, the 4 years of drought that we've had here, the incredible amount of wildfires, not just that California's had, but the whole West has had, we're living with the effects of climate change. And I believe we need to take a step back and say, what are the solutions that we need to undertake? We believe that, especially when you think about these incredible wildfires, it's about resilience. And so I think it's an opportunity for our state. We've been such a leader on all things climate change. Well, I think the next phase is to say, how can we be a leader on climate resiliency? And so going back to the question of the investments, a decision like the one that was made today, I'm disappointed. To not be able to recover those costs, that means that San Diego Gas and Electric in this particular case will have to absorb those costs. If this was once every 20-year event, if this was a once-in-a-lifetime event, you might say, well, go to it, San Diego Gas and Electric. But if these wildfires become the new normal, if these wildfires become endemic and part of the effects of climate change day in and day out, I don't believe it's sustainable for utilities to absorb that on a long-term basis. And utilities, and again, investor-owned utilities like ours, rely on investment from equity firms, from mom and pop shops, from hedge funds, et cetera. They have a choice to make about where to invest their money. They can invest their money with California utilities, with the strict liability without being able to recover costs, with wildfires coming, it seems, every year, or they can invest their money at other utilities that maybe have a different regulatory construct or maybe have a different set of rules associated with liability. And I think that's the central issue. How do we make sure that we continue to attract investment here in California at a time when we are so focused on continuing to drive improvements to our grid, continue to integrate more and more renewables, continue this push towards electrification of really all things, but in particular the transportation sector? How can we continue to attract smart investment if there's a fear from the investment community that there might be just an undue risk associated with their ability to recover a fair rate of return? So it's a big issue. We do need a different solution here in California. At the same time, I think I put myself in the regulator's shoes and I say, I understand that they don't want to just pass those costs on to our customers. Affordability matters, and so it's complicated. But I think this is a great time for leadership. It's a great time for California to take a step back and say, what are the right solutions? What do we need to do to make sure that we're doing everything possible to prevent and have a more resilient infrastructure that mitigates the impacts of wildfires and other climate change issues? But you can't go to zero. You're not going to be able to prevent all of them. So when wildfires occur, what's an intelligent approach for cost recovery? How do we do this? We're all in it together. I don't think it's fair to just put the burden on energy companies. I think it's a societal issue. We got to do a better job of forest management. We got to do a better job of training and provide resources to our first responder community. We got to do a better job of defensible space. What are the codes that maybe we need to potentially look at that are different? Building codes? What about planning and land use, and where are you allowed to build and not build? What about that wildland-urban interface? And as a utility, I'm thinking to myself and I'm wondering, what do I need to do different? Do I need to go in with steel poles instead of wooden poles? Does it make sense to underground certain sections? Do we have to expand our right-of-way for clearing? And I think the answer is yes to all of the above, and we got to figure out what are the right things to do for our great state. I don't think it's just one group coming up with the answers. I think it's putting together a coalition of smart people with interest in doing the right thing and coming up with a game plan. We can do it. I mean, we're Californians, and we're used to taking on big challenges. This is certainly a big one. And I'm all in on trying to help the state come up with a constructive solution.
A more holistic solution.
A more holistic solution.
Were there any audience? I see a hand sort of in the back. I see two hands right there, so we'll take those in succession.
Hi, Amber Mahone with E3. So PG&E is both a gas distribution company as well as an electric company. So looking forward, what do you see as the future of your gas distribution company, particularly with the climate lens?
Thank you. That's a really important question, and one that we wrestle with and one that we're looking at and constantly analyzing. We have an enormous gas business as well as an enormous electric business, and as we look beyond 2030, between now and 2030, when I look at the goals, GHG goals, renewable goals, et cetera, we are on a really good glide path to be able to achieve that. It's really when you start looking at beyond 2030, when you're looking at 2040 and 2050. Our 2050 goal is to have an 80% reduction of GHG from 1990 levels. That's huge, and you have to look at methane. You've got to consider methane. You've got to look at other greenhouse gases. You've got to look at sulfur hexafluoride. You've got to look at any number of other things. So as we take a step back, one of the things we're really focused on is how do we make sure that our operation is as clean as possible? How do we make sure we keep the gas in the pipeline? And we've been working really diligently to have less emissions from our gas pipeline system, as an example. We're also looking at what's the role of renewable natural gas? How can we potentially make the carbon intensity, if you will, or the GHG intensity of our natural gas be lessened? How do we start looking at customer behaviors? I gotta tell you, customers love their gas appliances, especially cooking and heating. So it's not just a question of what is a utility going to do, but again, it goes back to holistic. How do we tackle this as a society? The worst possible thing to do would be to go after this in a piecemeal effort. Decide, from now on, no more gas water heating. I'll tell you why that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because we still have to maintain that pipeline. We still are going to incur all those costs, and just going after it on a piecemeal basis means that the remaining customers, the remaining gas that's delivered, the costs are going to be so much higher. So maybe there needs to be a transitional strategy, again, for California to follow that says new construction may need to be electric. I think we've got to look at it in a more holistic manner.
And I think there was a question here as well.
Yes, Aileen Nowlin, Environmental Defense Fund, also with a question about natural gas and methane. There's a certain amount of transparency that we've come to expect in the electricity market. What will it take for a natural gas customer to have transparency to understand perhaps that their natural gas is zero leakage from production all the way to burner tip?
Wow, that's one of the things that we're working on right now, is really doing an assessment, a baseline of what is our current sort of carbon footprint from our own operations, and then we've established a goal to say in the next 5 years we want to reduce that by 10%, 15%. Be able to actually identify it down to a customer level. That's going to be difficult. I don't have an answer for you today. I'd love any suggestions you might have, or if you've worked with other utilities that have made some progress on that. We're looking at it very much on a holistic basis, and I don't know that I have a way today, doesn't mean we won't be able to in the future, of being able to give that level of clarity and transparency at a customer point level.
So there's a question here, and then I have a question on nuclear.
Okay.
So please go ahead.
Great, thanks. Julia Piper with Green Tech Media. I wanted to ask you about community choice aggregation, a growing trend. I think it's 80% of customers in California will be part of a CCA in the near future. I'm forgetting the exact date, but how is PG&E thinking about that? And specifically, what do you think it means for renewable energy procurement? Because they have their own plans. You guys already have generation in the pipeline or coming up. And when we think about driving to 50%, who's getting 50%?
Right.
The state or you? Who's paying for that? Will it be more costly than we think it will be?
Yeah, it's complicated because when you have one company or a group of companies that are responsible for the whole amount, if you will, or most of the amount, you can have great visibility and a great trajectory in terms of being there. What you're going to have is many different providers of the commodity. And it's a state goal. So we all are going to have to work in concert with achieving the greenhouse gas reductions. In our case, we view it as customer's choice. We support that customer choice. There is plenty of power available in California today. I think one of the issues that CCAs and our policymakers will have to grapple with at some point is, as we, the big companies like myself, like my company, start shutting down certain power generation facilities because you no longer need them, because you're not serving the commodity to customers, or we discontinue power purchase agreements that we have, again, because we no longer need it, will the CCAs be able to make it up? And holistically, who is going to be looking at statewide reliability, statewide adequacy, resource adequacy? So there's a real need, I believe, for, again, California policymakers to look at this and make sure that we're looking at it with a long-term view. We support our communities going CCA, and we will continue to do that. But we do have some questions in terms of long-term reliability and resource adequacy that needs to be addressed.
Just one last quick question, because we do need to wrap. But given what you've just said, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the nuclear question, the role of nuclear. Yeah. You just decided to not license the last nuclear power plant. Yeah. Can you talk briefly about that decision and where you think nuclear fits into the big picture?
We love nuclear, and we love our Diablo Canyon power plant. It's been such a big part of our history. We have a history, a very long history of being supporters of nuclear power. As a matter of fact, I think the first commercial operations license was issued here in California to our company. So we go way back on nuclear. But what happened is a confluence of issues. It's CCAs, it's greater levels of energy efficiency, which we are very supportive of, and it's greater levels of distributed energy resources where customers are providing their own power. So we see a need, less need for power production in the future. So that was number one. And number two, as we look at the mix of power that are required by our policymakers, we talked about 50% by 2030. We have a smaller pie, and half of that pie has to be 50% renewable. It really crowded nuclear out. When we did our analysis, when we did, and we did Monte Carlo simulation looking at a number of assumptions, the best case we could look at is that Diablo Canyon would operate about 50% of the time. And if anyone knows anything about nuclear, you can't be cycling nuclear. It's not a intermittent resource, it's a baseload resource. And so as painful as it was, because this is the most difficult decision I've ever made in my career, we felt that it was the right decision. Renewables are coming online at a pretty good clip. Community choice aggregators are also taking responsibility for providing commodity service, and it squeezed our nuclear plant out of the picture, unfortunately.
Geisha, thank you for such a smart, thought-provoking conversation. It was great to have you.
Thanks for having me.